Hey everyone. So, my topic of the day today is wine tasting and tasting notes generally. Because I feel like when people like wine, if they're not wine professionals, if their employment doesn't officially include wine, then I think people generally get quite hung up with tasting and what they're supposed to smell, and they maybe people who just like wine maybe watch TVs on program where they have the wine expert who comes on and gives their kind of expertise, and they go through the nose and on the palate and on the finish. And I appreciate that for the general consumer of wine that's maybe never studied wine, it can all seem a bit daunting, and also it can just be really puzzling. And you might sometimes watch someone on TV talk about wine, talking about what they can smell, and really not understand. And so I guess the point of this video that I really want to convey, the message I want to convey, is that I want people to understand that you don't just wake up and smell the roses literally in wine. You don't. People who taste wine professionally, they won't have got all those different nuances in the wine from the very beginning. Learning about wine and sort of like learning how to spot those aromas, it's something that actually takes a lot of practice. And so it's kind of like almost a muscle memory. The same way that someone who's an athlete has to train every day, maybe for like hours a day, to get to their personal best. It's literally that kind of thing. You have to train your palate to really spot flavors and spot the aromas. You have to train your nose. And I just really wanted to make that clear, because I think people see wine experts talk about wine and they think that they're like delusional, or that they are just, making shit up. Um, you know, the reality is that in some, medium to high quality wines, the likelihood is you are going to get more interesting and a more diverse range of flavors and aromas than, say, that, £5 bottle of wine that you bought from the supermarket. That's just the truth. So that's just the first thing I wanted to say. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that don't be afraid to just practice and have your own opinion. And if you maybe do one of these online wine tastings that are becoming all the rage in COVID, where a lot of wine shops are doing Zoom wine tastings, never feel afraid to say what you think you can smell, because so much is subjective anyway. And some of the best wine experts out there say some of the most crazy things, like, I can smell fresh tennis ball on this wine. Literally, I have heard someone say that. And people can say it smells like my grandma's closet about, maybe a Pinot Noir. Maybe someone would say that. I don't know. But I just want you to be more confident. If you're just somebody who loves wine, I just want you to have more confidence with it. And remember that there's no definite right or wrong. A lot of the time, wine notes are subjective. So that's what I wanted to say. And then finally, just as a little educational thing for anybody who really, over COVID, over lockdown, whatever, wants to really get into wine and start journaling their wine tasting, if they just do it for fun. Just from the perspective of somebody who has been through wine education, I would always suggest to you that you split your tasting notes into sort of the nose, what you can smell, the palate, what you can taste, and the finish, any kind of like aftertaste that you get. And try and split the kind of things you can taste into primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary aromas tend to be like just the fruitiness, or maybe, if you can smell minerality, any kind of hints of like flint or stone. Sometimes people smell things like limestone. That would be like maybe a primary aroma. Secondary aroma is things like, if you've got an aged wine like a Rioja, you might smell things like vanilla or cinnamon, or general baking spices, or cedar, that tends to be considered tertiary. That's related to how the wine may have been aged. And then also another thing that you might get is butteriness in a secondary aroma, because it might have been through malolactic fermentation. This is just for people who want to get really geeky about it. And then finally, you've got your tertiary aromas, and that's for wines that have been significantly aged for a substantial period of time. And that's those kind of aromas you get where they're like really funky aromas. So it might be like barnyard, like forest floor, or sometimes I even say like church, when you smell a wine and it smells like church. And that tends to be from that tends to be categorized as like a tertiary aroma, that kind of really unusual nuances, those kind of really unusual smells you can get. So that's my kind of homework to you if you're somebody who's going to spend this time just trying to get really into wine. That's my advice.